Hey folks, Judd, Zulgad, Jess Myers. Thanks for coming to 1500ESPN.com. And Jess, we are very close to putting the finishing touches on the Wild season. There's game, there's set, there's match, and then there's got to be something else for Thursday night. Wild at home tonight, Game 3 of the second round series against the Blackhawks. They lose 1-0, and I think this thing, now I'm not saying that the Wild can't win Thursday, but I think this thing is just about done. Would you agree with that?
The adage I kept hearing heading into this one and heading into any series where you're down 2-0 is you aren't really in trouble until you've lost a game on home ice.
Mm-hmm.
The Wild are in deep trouble
yes.
in a lot of ways.
Because I've always said it's the third game. A series doesn't start until every team gets a home game. Well, they have now, and the Wild is in trouble. You're right.
And talking off air, you compared this a little bit to 2 years ago when the Blackhawks won the series 4-1. Think of all the excuses we could have made 2 years ago about the fact that Nicholas Backstrom got hurt in warm-ups right before the season started. He had been their mainstay in goal. Mm-hmm. Jason Zucker was hurt. The Wild hadn't been in the playoffs in a long time. It was their first playoffs with the Parise-Suter addition. The Blackhawks were an incredibly good team that year. They started the regular season something like 26-0-3. En route to winning a Stanley Cup. Right. You had all these excuses about how, hey, the Wild just weren't ready to compete 2 years ago. This year, everything was supposed to be different. I wrote about this, but Crawford was supposed to be shaky. Patrick Kane was supposed to be hurt. Keep in mind, he wasn't even supposed to be back in the lineup now. He had a broken clavicle.
He's been in the lineup all right.
He's been in the lineup, and the biggest thing, the Wild were supposed to score some goals. Where are they?
Yeah, I was going to say, let's start there, because we could certainly talk about the fact that Devan Dubnyk has not stood on his head in this series. But the fact of the matter is Patrick Kane scored a bit of a shaky goal tonight on Dubnyk, but it was 1-0. So the Wild did not score. Let's start up front. Where is, well, heck, I can just name him. Where is Jason Pominville, Nino Niederreiter, Mikko Koivu, your captain, Thomas Vanek, who I thought played really well in Game 1, but has been brutal since. Where are the forwards?
It's not like we haven't seen this either. Vanek wasn't here last year, but he disappeared in the playoffs. Pominville had a shaky playoffs last year. And, we see the playoffs do this to guys, and that's, I think, another reason why you have to tip your hat to the effort Chicago has put out in this series is the guys that you knew had the ability to beat you have stood up and beat you.
Yeah, their stars have been stars.
Yeah, you haven't been able to key on Sharp or Kane or Taves or any of these guys because it's been a combination of all of them. I'm not going to blame Devan Dubnyk. I think he's been okay. He hasn't been great. He hasn't stolen a game for you, obviously.
Right.
But I didn't see a bad goal tonight. I saw Patrick Kane doing what Patrick Kane does. Yeah. And beyond that, he made 21 saves and kept you in the game where any one of those Chicago rushes would have made it 2-0 and would have cleared out this building in a hurry.
What gets into Corey Crawford against the Wild? Because Corey Crawford in the first round against Nashville was pulled. He was lifted. He came back in Game 6 when the Blackhawks closed out that series only because Darling was struggling so much. Why is Corey Crawford a combination of, as Mike Yeo said, Martin Brodeur, he is
Patrick
Waugh, he is, as far as I'm concerned, George Vezina, he's a little bit of Kenny Dryden. Why? What happens to Corey Crawford when he sees the Wild green?
Again, this was supposed to be different. Remember all the comparisons we had to the Twins versus the Yankees in the 2000s where, it didn't matter who you put on the mound. It didn't matter who was up to bat.
Yes.
The Yankees were going to find a way to beat you because they were in your heads. Corey Crawford is in their heads. And, you saw him doing stuff tonight uncharacteristic of him, dropping the goalie stick and making the blocker save with his open hand to keep a puck out of the net. Just goofy stuff like that. He's in the Wild's heads, and Charlie Coyle's inspiring quote is, "Well, we're still breathing." Well,
you're on life support, buddy.
you're breathing, but it's labored.
I thought it was interesting tonight, and this goes back to last year. The Blackhawks took the first 2 games at home against the Wild.
Yep.
They came here, and I think they were genuinely surprised, 1, by the uptick in play by the Wild, and 2, by the crowd at the X. I think the crowd at the X was so loud that they didn't realize how much momentum the Wild would draw from that crowd. Do you agree with me in this sense? Tonight the Blackhawks come out, they score the first period goal, and then they say to themselves, all right, we can do one of 2 things. We can continue to press and create an exciting environment and game, or we can go into a 40-minute, basically, defensive shell.
Yep.
And for the most part, and the Wild never really established offensive zone time. They got chances, but they didn't establish zone time. It was almost like Joel Quenneville and the Blackhawks said, we're not going to have a repeat of last year. We are going to bore everyone in this building to death until they just shut up and go home. I really thought that the Blackhawks had a game plan, which was, We will go up against the ropes. We will let you punch us. We will probably not let you score. And then the building will be lifeless, and we'll take a 3-0 lead.
Would we call
Do you
this?
agree with that?
Would we call this the Mayweather?
It is.
theory?
It's the Floyd Mayweather. It is. It's.
I'm trying to be topical. You get that?
It was very good, but no, you're exactly right. I was watching this game tonight, and I thought, as talented and as great as the Blackhawks can be, we're not going to try and utilize our talents. We're up 1-0. We're going to bore you.
We don't need more than one goal.
Yes.
You know, we can beat this team with one goal. We've essentially done it, you know, so far. Yeah, and there was one maybe 40-second span in the third period where the Wild were cycling. You know, Parisi was throwing the puck back to the point. The guys on the point were throwing it around, getting pucks to the net.
Yeah.
One kind of inspiring 40 seconds. Now, if that's your offensive highlight of a playoff game, you got problems.
They didn't establish the zone whatsoever.
No.
They got chances. Granlund had the breakaway. Pominville missed an open net again. I mean, he's a mess. But they had chances to score. But you tell me, did you ever see a time when they actually established the zone? Excuse me, because I didn't.
There was that 140 seconds, and it's one of those deals too where it was kind of toward the end of a shift, and the Wild actually kind of ran out of gas on their own offense, and you know, Chicago sent the puck down the ice, and both teams changed. It was just one of those deals where it just was in their heads and wasn't going to happen. I mean, you know, and I know this team is really frustrated because again, it was supposed to be different. This thing. They'd added all these things. They'd had an easier time in round one than they'd probably ever had before. Well, definitely ever had before because they'd never won a game in 6 games before, or never won a series in 6 games before.
Right.
You know, and it started right with game one. I mean, to make that kind of valiant comeback after getting behind as big as they did in the first period, and then to get nothing to show for it. I think that really set them back as much as they said the right things that, oh yeah, we're fine. You know, we're keeping our heads high. We played well. Yada yada.
Did those who took to the airwaves in the Twin Cities and said it's going to be a 7-game series and it's going to be close and blah blah blah, did those people underestimate the Blackhawks? The Blackhawks didn't have a great regular season, but what I'm seeing now is a team that was really smart about it and said seeding doesn't matter. President's Trophy, who cares? What I'm seeing now is some people grossly underestimated the Blackhawks and thought to themselves, the Wild's really good. I think the Wild is good, but the Blackhawks have Taves. The Blackhawks have Kane. The Blackhawks have Duncan Keith. I can go down a list of players that the Wild simply doesn't have.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, and the one thing I think about this, you mentioned the President's Trophy. The one time I went to Chicago Stadium, the last year it was open, hanging from the rafters is this beautiful 1991 President's Trophy banner. Now, you remember how that season ended for the Blackhawks. What does it mean? You know, you're absolutely right. Get to the playoffs. I mean, the LA Kings have had this this roadmap the 2 times they've won the Stanley Cup recently. Granted, they didn't make the playoffs this year, but get in. Anything can happen. You're seeing it again from Chicago.
All right, Jess, thank you very much. Once again, the Wild down 3-0 in the series. Game 4 at the X on Thursday very well could be the end of the line and season for the Wild. We shall see. Check out our coverage, 1500ESPN.com. He's Jess Myers. I'm Judd Zulgad. Thanks for coming to the website. I'm sure we'll be back soon to put a cap on everything.